I am 62. The afternoon light has been sitting on the wall across from my bed for hours now, barely moving. It does that more slowly than it used to. Or maybe it's just me who has slowed. 3 months ago, a doctor with tired eyes told me the name of a disease I had barely heard before. A rare neurological disorder, progressive, irreversible. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. They estimate I have somewhere between weeks and months. Estimates are strange things. They sound precise, but they are made of fog. I used to believe I was building something solid. A career, a reputation, a life that looked respectable from the outside. I spent decades inside glass offices, under artificial light, speaking in careful tones about deadlines and contracts. People called me reliable, successful, dedicated. My calendar was always full. That felt like proof of worth. There were evenings when my daughter stood in the doorway of my home office, already in pajamas, waiting for me to close the laptop. She never asked directly. She just lingered there, pretending to be interested in the books on my shelf. I would say, "Give me 10 more minutes." 10 minutes became years. She is 28 now. Last winter, during a visit that felt shorter than it should have, she said quietly while washing dishes, "You were never unkind, just unavailable." She didn't accuse me. She didn't raise her voice. That somehow hurt more. A month after my diagnosis, I received a letter from the firm, a framed certificate of recognition, 30 years of service. They mailed it with care, heavy paper, gold letters. I placed it on the table and stared at it for a long time. It didn't make me proud. It didn't make me sad either. It felt like an artifact from someone else's life. There was a man I once knew, Daniel. We started in the same graduate program. He left after the first year. Said he didn't want his life to shrink to corridors and conference rooms. I remember laughing politely when he told me he planned to open a small bookstore with his partner. A bookstore, of all things. Years passed. I accumulated promotions. Daniel accumulated stories. Children who grew up around shelves. Regular customers who brought him soup when he got sick. A life that fit inside his own skin. He visited me recently, sat by the window, watched the dust moving through the sunlight, said very little. He didn't need to explain anything. His presence answered questions I had never asked myself in time. What unsettles me most is not the diagnosis. It's the realization that I kept postponing a life that was already happening. Not with grand declarations, just with small delays. After this project, after this quarter, after this year. The room is quiet now, except for the faint sound of the oxygen machine. The world outside the window continues with its usual indifference. Cars pass, people hurry somewhere important. I used to be one of them. Daniel never earned much. He told me once, almost apologetically, how small the margins were in a shop that sold mostly second-hand books. I remember nodding while silently calculating how many of his months equaled one of my bonuses. At the time, I thought I had won some invisible contest. What Daniel did with his days looks ordinary on paper. He walked his children to school. He closed the shop on Wednesdays so he and his partner could drive to the coast and eat fish from paper plates. He spent evenings recommending novels to strangers who later became familiar faces. He learned to play the guitar badly, then slightly better, then just for himself. Nothing impressive, nothing that would fit neatly into a resume. And yet, when he sat beside my bed last month, he seemed settled, not cheerful, not heroic, just rooted, like someone who had stood in the same weather long enough to grow into it. I spent my life moving. Deadlines, calendars, corridors, meetings, always towards something that stayed just ahead of reach. There was a moment during Daniel's visit. The room was quiet except for the low rhythm of the ventilator. A nurse passed in the hallway, shoes soft against linoleum. Daniel was watching the curtain shift slightly where the window wasn't fully closed. "I think I got the better deal," he said. Not with pride, just as an observation. I didn't argue. For most of my life, I believed everything important would begin later, after the next milestone, after the next contract, after the next season of effort. Later became a habit. Then it became a reflex. Then it became everything. My wife's name is Eleanor. She is 59 now. We have been married longer than I care to count properly. Numbers feel slippery these days. Last week, she sat beside me while I tried to finish a cup of lukewarm tea. The teaspoon clinked too loudly against the porcelain. She said, gently, as if testing the weight of the memory, "Do you remember that little apartment we saw near the river? The one with the yellow kitchen?" I didn't. She smiled the way people do when they are used to being forgotten. "You said we would move somewhere like that when work eased up." We never moved. Work never eased. The river kept flowing without us. There are cities I will never walk through with her. Streets that exist only in postcards now. Cafes where we will never sit pretending not to listen to the conversations around us. Strangely, those are not the thoughts that wake me at night. What returns instead are smaller things. A Tuesday evening when she brought 2 bowls of soup into the living room and paused when she saw the laptop still open on my knees. She didn't complain. She simply took her bowl back to the kitchen. A Saturday morning, when my daughter wanted to make waffles shaped like stars, the batter already mixed, the counter dusted with flour, I told her next weekend without looking away from the screen. She stopped asking eventually. The hospice wing has its own rhythm, slow footsteps, curtains drawn halfway, voices softened by habit. Some of the volunteers here are well into their 80s. They move carefully, but their eyes remain alert, as though something in them stayed awake while the rest of the body surrendered. There is one woman who comes every Thursday. Her name is Margaret. She wears the same pale blue cardigan each time. It smells faintly of lavender. She once told me, while folding blankets with deliberate care, that her husband died when she was 51. No drama in the telling, just a fact, like weather. After that, she sold most of what she owned, bought a small van, and spent years driving from town to town with a sketchbook on her lap. She showed me photographs on her phone, watercolors of desert motels, a lighthouse painted from memory, the back of a man's head in a cafe, somewhere she no longer remembered the name of. "I thought I had waited long enough," she said. She hadn't spoken with bitterness, just clarity. Margaret had less than I did. fewer degrees, fewer doors opened for her. And yet she seemed to have touched more of the world than I ever allowed myself to. I lie here now, meals reduced to soft textures, hands unsteady around the edges, listening to the same afternoon repeat itself. Light across the wall, the distant murmur of carts rolling down the corridor, someone laughing far away near the elevators. There is nothing dramatic about it, only the slow understanding that while I was gathering credentials and proof of worth, others were gathering ordinary hours and calling them their lives. Walking has become an exercise in negotiation. I count the tiles between the bed and the window. Some mornings my legs agree. Other mornings they hesitate, as if waiting for a signal that never arrives. The calendar on the wall still shows the right month, but I have stopped trusting the days. They slide into one another too quietly. What surprises me is not the weakness. It is where the mind wanders when the body no longer cooperates. It returns to small afternoons. A bicycle leaned against the fence in the backyard. My daughter standing beside it, hands already on the handlebars, hopeful and uncertain in equal measure. She asked only once that day. When I said I was tired, she nodded and wheeled it away without argument. A weekend, Eleanor mentioned casually while rinsing vegetables in the sink. The idea of driving toward the coast with no plan, just air through open windows, just the sound of waves we didn't need to schedule. I told her it wasn't a good time. It was never a good time. Those moments did not disappear loudly. They folded themselves away one after another until the house felt quieter without me ever noticing when the silence began. Some evenings now, I notice a list tucked beneath my reading glasses on the bedside table. The paper has gone soft at the edges from being handled too often. It contains ordinary dreams, learning another language, seeing a country whose names I used to underline in travel articles, reading the books I kept buying but never opening, writing a few pages of something that did not need to be useful, walking a long trail without watching the clock. I used to believe these were patient things, that they would wait. The paper suggests otherwise. Last week, my daughter came in the late afternoon. The light followed her across the floor before she reached the chair. She sat without speaking at first, holding my hand as if it was something fragile she had found and did not want to drop. "I like being here with you," she said eventually. No drama, no ceremony, just a sentence offered the way people offer tea. There was nothing in her voice that needed earning, nothing that required proof. I lay there afterward, listening to the low murmur of the building settling, wondering how many evenings I had exchanged for emails that are already forgotten. Some of the other residents talk about the future in careful phrases. Next spring, the holidays, a family wedding months away. I listen without interrupting. Eleanor does not speak in that tense anymore. She talks instead about things already done. The garden we once tried to keep alive. The chipped mug we bought on a trip I barely remember. The yellow kitchen that existed only in a conversation. My daughter's birthday approaches quietly. No one announces it. The number does not need saying. It hangs in the room like dust in a beam of light. There are events I once assumed I would attend by default. Milestones I thought belonged to me simply because I had worked toward them. They now resemble doors I walk past so often I forgot to notice when they closed. Nothing about this feels dramatic. It is closer to a slow accounting. Outside the window, someone has taped a child's drawing to the glass of a car parked below. Bright markers. A sun in the corner. The lines unsteady but certain. I find myself watching it longer than I expect to. Eleanor asked me something the other night. The room was already dim. Only the small lamp near the sink was still on, its light catching the rim of a glass she had forgotten to move. She said it without looking at me, as though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. If you could step back into it, she said, your life, just for a moment, where would you go? I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, because there were too many small places to choose from. A kitchen where the radio played low while flour gathered on the counter. A living room where the sofa still held its shape before years wore it flat. A doorway where a child waited quietly, pretending she had nowhere else to be. I told Eleanor I would go to an ordinary evening. Nothing special, no celebration, no milestone. Just one night where the laptop stayed closed. She nodded once, as though she had expected that answer all along. Later, when the hallway quieted and even the carts stopped rolling, I tried to imagine myself returning to that younger body, standing there again with all that time ahead. The thought felt almost fictional, like remembering a house that no longer exists. Some things no longer invite imagination. The list on my bedside table has grown thinner, not because I completed anything on it, but because I have stopped pretending it belongs to me. A few pages remain, curled corners, pencil marks that look like they belong to someone else. Eleanor still brings them back to the table each morning, straightens the stack, aligns the edges, as if order might persuade the day to behave. Outside, the same tree stands beyond the window. Its leaves have begun to turn, though the season insists it is not yet time. Each afternoon they catch the light differently, not dramatically, just enough to notice if you are paying attention. I find myself watching for that shift now, not for meaning, just for proof that something is still moving. There are hours when the building grows very quiet. Even the machines seem to hold their breath. In those pauses, memory feels less like regret and more like a visitor who has stayed too long but no longer needs explaining. This morning, someone down the hall was laughing. A nurse, perhaps. The sound travelled strangely, bouncing once before reaching my door. It lingered longer than I expected. I lay there listening, wondering how many moments like that once passed through my own house without my noticing they had arrived.